Well, we've finally done it. We've finally crossed into the boundary of when I started playing the game. Hey guys, this is GamerCal. Terrible puns aside, we are talking about Pokemon TCG stuff again. It's another history video. And this time we're on to Boundaries Crossed, which is the first Black and White 2 set. And yeah, the first set that I actually did some stuff for. I had finally made like a PTCGO account and whatnot. I managed to get a good amount of the cards to make up a decent number of decks. Thankfully this was back when there was only like 6 sets to actually, or 6, 7 that were relevant to get cards from. And yeah, I started playing the game for a bit. I had never actually played Modern at that point. I'd only ever played like the Game Boy game and some super ridiculously casual stuff with friends back, you know, in the day. So it was kind of learning a new thing with it, but I was relatively well connected at the time with, you know, people from Poke Beach that were nice and, you know, taught me a little bit about how to play the game. And we had some fun times. It was pretty good. So clearly, I have a reasonable bit of nostalgia for this set being the first one that I came in on. However, I will be the first one to say that this is not the best set when it comes to brand new Pokemon. There is a new, like, in-the-box mechanic deck for sure, which is really good. And Size almost definitely showing that off, because he had some fun making that already. But as far as the rest of the stuff goes, I don't know, the last set was definitely better. But that's okay, because we do have a lot of fun stuff to look at here anyway. First off, some really amazing looking full arts for the EXs down here. I get some of my favourites actually from this set, and it's not even just nostalgia either. This Cresselia just looks gorgeous with the Aurora behind it and everything as well. And yeah, there's a new mechanic in terms of the trainers in this set as well, the ACE specs, including our good old friend Computer Search. ACE specs are, I guess, the first time that we see this sort of mechanic since Pokemon Star. You can only have one ACE spec of any kind in your deck, and that's kind of neat. They can print like a super powerful trainer that's really nice to have. Really good for the format in general because it helps the consistency or other power level stuff, but you're not allowed to play multiples of them, and you can't play different ones in the deck either, so you have to make a choice. Kind of like a lot of times where they introduce this sort of thing though, they kind of introduce the best one as the very first one here, so rip, I suppose. But let's just go over the trainers and then obviously into the Pokemon as we go. We have a new stadium in here, which is an interesting one. Aspertia City Gym, it's kind of neat for Tornadus and stuff, I suppose. Each colorless Pokemon in play gains 20 HP, so this would turn your Bufalon into a 120 HP tank, which is pretty nice. Gives you a counter to Tropical Beach, I suppose, if the opponent's playing that. Could counter Sky Arrow as well, so it could be good against a Ray Eels deck. And yeah, it makes Tornadus-EX 190 HP, so that's pretty solid. It's okay. You don't tend to see it too often. It's not the most powerful thing out there, but it's definitely worth noting nonetheless. Get some reprints in here as well, like Energy Search, Great Ball, Pokeball, etc. This is not quite a new base set, but I guess the start of a new generation, they wanted just to print that sort of bit. I don't know, or not generation, a new game series, I guess. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Hugh over here, not the greatest of supporters, but it is technically a new draw support. Both players draw or discard cards from the hand until they have 5 cards left. So, clearly not very powerful if you are behind in terms of your, or I should say ahead in terms of the hand size count. If your hand is full of other supporters, this is going to make you discard, and that's not very good. It also could make the opponent draw a bunch of cards, so it's another N in that sort of situation, except it doesn't really play well against, like, if you're ending the opponent to a low hand size, you really don't want to play this, because then you'll just give them a bunch of cards back, which is not great. And also, it does have some issues of the fact that it only draws until 5, so usually you're not even going to get a Charon out of this, so you're generally just better playing the Charon. But I think if you are a hyper aggressive item based deck, you could probably get some use out of this. but then I just don't know why you would use this instead of Bianca in that case, because you draw an extra card, and that makes a ton of difference, to be honest. So, yeah, not really strong enough, unfortunately. We get Pokeball Potion. Rocky Helmet gets a reprint here in the API that we use for the card images. This does not have the leak symbol on it, so it's infinitely better. Just saying. Skylar is a really nice one to come out in this set. We've been waiting for this for a while. Search your deck for a trainer card. Put it into hand. This is Gen 5 trainer, of course, or modern day trainers, so this will be any card that you want in that class. Supporter card, stadium card, tool card, item, whatever you want. It's pretty good in this situation. Skylar has often been too slow in the future formats, and this format's kind of unique in that way because we don't generally have a lot of decks that are crazy high on the pressure count early, and this lets you get the evolutions into play that a lot of decks rely on by searching for rare candy, right? I used Roserade in the Empoleon deck last round just to make sure that I could get rare candy when I needed it. This can let you get the trainer you want instead. And if it's a Pokemon that you need from it, well, you could Skylar for Ultra Ball, and then discard the cards, go that way, right? Very powerful with Tropical Beach as well, to act as a sort of draw card. So, for those who could afford it, really powerful in that aspect. Gets a lovely full art in this set as well. Just the background of this is really pretty. There are other Skylars that we could use that way, but the less that's said about them at the moment, the better, in my opinion. Switch is in here as well, of course. Town Map is a new trainer, new item card that lets you flip your prizes face up. So it's a one-sided Team Rocket Returns from the Rocket set. Not the supporter version that was in the Gen 3 set, just the regular one. It's really solid. Yes, it gives the opponent the info as well, but it lets you know what's in your prizes and where they are. If you can fit space for it, it is a really good card. It tends to be the 61st card of a set of a deck list though, so you don't often see it just because it's hard to fit in, but if you can, really good card. The ACE specs, the main two are Computer Search and Goal Potion. Computer Search does exactly what it did before. You discard 2 cards from your hand and then search your deck for any one card. You don't show the opponent what the card is because it's not a specific type of card that you're searching for, so that's pretty good. And of course, if you're playing a Sableye deck, you can junk hunt this back into hand, and that makes a very powerful resource loop. So every deck has got to at least consider this. Most decks will end up playing this card, but it's especially good in dark decks, which are one of the reasons why they are so powerful and so hated out of the format as, you know, fighting types, etc. as they are, is because of stuff like this. The other good one is Goal Potion. This heals 90 damage from your active Pokemon, so you're very often taking yourself out of 2-hit KO range with this, which is obviously very strong. Limitations, of course, is that it's only to the active, but unlike Max Potion, which is your competition for this card, you don't have to discard any energy on this. So there are a few decks that will actually favor this over Computer Search. EX-centric decks, the ones that tend to only have EXs and maybe one other thing to hit, like a Sigilith or something, love this card. You know, Landorus was something we're going to talk about in a second that actually really appreciates having this around. The other two are tool cards, and so are automatically very sketch because Tool Scrapper just deletes them, but they are to be used with the black and white Kyurem EXs, which are in this set. We'll talk about what they do in a sec, but Crystal Edge lets your white Kyurem do 50 more damage to the active Pokemon. Very solid to allow you to just do like 200 basically with white Kyurem's attack. Really nice. Does give you one-shots on basically everything. So this is the more useful one because Crystal Wall is a pure defensive thing. If this is attached to black Kyurem EX, its max HP is 300. We don't get to see a 300 HP Pokemon, like, straight up, until, I believe, Magikarp and Wailord tag team. That's several generations away by now, and it's kind of crazy to think we actually got to that point. But, yeah, this would be insane to keep yourself alive, but there's two problems, of course, Tool Scrapper being the big one. But the other one is that dragons are really popular right now, and Black Huron being a dragon is weak to dragon. So it's not impossible for like a plus, even if Hydreigon was playing plus power, you could one-shot it with that. It's not impossible for Altaria to end up getting kills on you as well. So yeah, it's tough. Just not good enough, really. I love the acronym for it here, though. It's yeah, just race. It's Rare Ace. It's very funny to me. I don't know why. Okay, on to the EXs. Celebi lets you play. It's effectively Memory Berry, but on a 110 2-prizer. And that's effectively as far as it goes. Wind Whisk is an interesting attack, but just not powerful enough and takes too much energy for a 110 HP Pokemon. But it's Sky Arrow Bridge compatible. It lets you use your Prevo attacks, and some decks might be able to take advantage of that. It's cool, just not the most applicable thing out there. Very cool artwork though. Keldeo-EX is the big one from this set, or one of the two big ones. It's 170 HP, so it can be a little bit vulnerable, especially to itself, as we'll see in a sec. 2 retreat. It's a bit awkward with Sky Arrow, but you can still pay it in like raid decks and stuff, it's still fine. Water typing is really solid for the fighting ground, the ground types basically, that we'll get into in a minute. And its attack and ability are both really solid. Rush In lets you force it into the active if it's on the bench, so this can bypass stuff like Vanillux's paralysis. It can let you retreat for free with just one guy if Darkrai's in play and you've got like a dark energy on this thing. And it just means that you're never truly stuck behind catcher like a lot of decks have been. Think of my game versus Pepper, where he captured my Ray back up. It had 3 energies to a retreat cost and I just couldn't do anything before he lasered my stuff away, right? If I get rid of the tool on the Garbodor, then I could rush in with the Keldeo and retreat much more easily. So yeah, it makes a big difference. Secret Sword as its attack works really well with the Blastoise in this set, but is generally decent for a few other decks as well. It lets you do 50 for 3 colorless energy, which is terrible, but for every water energy that's on it, no limit to it now, it does plus 20 damage. Back in the day, Hydro Pump type attacks needed a hard cap on how many times you could add to it. Like it was 2 basically. So that's a big change in terms of what it does. But functionally, this means it can do 110 damage for 3 energy, which is 2 shots on everything. Very powerful. But it can also go further if it has to. You can do 170 if you put 6 energy down, and that KOs Mewtwo in 1 hit. So yeah, it's risky, but it really can do a ton as well just by itself. It's also weak to grass, not lightning, which means that raid decks don't kill it immediately either. So yeah, or eel decks I should say. You don't get to hit it with a Bolt Strike and take it out in 1 shot. So exceptionally powerful card. Very important engine piece for most decks going forward, or at least one of, for most decks going forward. Even more so when Floatstone comes out, but we'll get there in a couple of sets time. Cresselia is a lovely looking card, and I wish it was slightly better. It's only got 1 retreat, so Sky Arrow compatible is pretty solid. 170 HP, a little bit annoying on this thing. Its attack is very expensive for what it does, but at least it doesn't get killed back by Mewtwo and can one-shot it. 1 Psychic, 3 colors to do 90, and during your next turn, this Pokemon has no weakness. So unless they double catcher, you're not going to lose to Mewtwo, which is fine. The ability is what makes this interesting. Anytime between turns, heal 10 damage from this Pokemon. So you could use this, I guess, with Superior to heal additional damage, and it just becomes very hard to kill. But it's a really difficult point to get to. So it's tough. I don't know. You can make a deck out of it. It's not going to be the strongest thing out there, but it does look nice. So there is that. Landorus is the other huge card that comes out of this set. Raid decks hate it. Eel decks just fold if they do not have a game plan against this thing. It's a 180 HP dude. It's 3 energy to retreat, so you can heavy ball search this. It is weak to water, which is critical from this set, but wasn't too prevalent before then. So if you don't come across a Blastoise deck, you're probably okay. Resistance to lightning is really good against the lightning-based decks, of course. Although Eel decks do tend to go outside of that now, but you know, it's fine. You can still do some pretty good resistance stuff with that. But it's really the attacks that make this thing so good. Hammerhead for 1 fighting energy does 30, and 30 to one of the opponent's bench Pokemon. Yeah, we're at 60 for 1 now, basically. That is absolutely ridiculous. The snipe damage from Night Spear is now on a 1 energy attack. That's just ridiculous. Lance Judgment for 2 fighting and a colorless does 80, and if you discard all the fighting energy that's on this thing, it does 150 instead, which is almost there, but it gets there with the chip that you put from Hammerhead. Fighting is a difficult type to accelerate energy to, so it isn't too common that you're going to Lance Judgment for full value, but Ho-Oh Energy Switch could potentially do it. Critically, you only discard the fighting energy, and it does have 1 colorless in its attack cost, so if you can shift a non-fighting energy to it as well, or just attach one, then you don't have to discard free energy to do this, which is pretty good. 80 damage is also fine because, yeah, it doesn't quite kill Darkrai in 1 hit, but any chip from Hammerhead will mean that it kills, so it's still very powerful into Darkrai, and yeah, it's just insane all around. There's so many decks that can just use this as an efficient attacker. It's extremely aggressive, probably not something the game needed to be more of at the moment, but I mean, it's there. It's very good against the evolving decks, except for Blastoise, and we'll get into why later on. The other 2 are the Kyurems. Black Kyurem, this is the one that can get up to 300 HP, but you're never going to do that for obvious reasons. Both of these have also got free energy to retreat, they're 180 HP, so Heavy Ball searchable, that's pretty good for the Blastoise deck actually. And yeah, Dragon Fang for 1 lightning, 2 colorless, you do 60 and flip for paralysis. Kind of boring, but I mean, such is the way, right? Just how it is. 1 water, 2 lightning, and a colorless lets this Kyurem do 150 damage, which is almost good numbers. It can't attack next turn, so you do need a way of switching out. The unfortunate thing is this takes 2 lightning and not 2 water. If this was like lightning, 2 water, and a colorless, you could probably consider it as a Blastoise deck before it gets eclipsed by the next one in the next set, but you know, it isn't. And Eel decks, I don't think, want to splash water just to play something that is fundamentally worse for them than what Rayquaza would be. So, yeah, it doesn't have a home. White Kyurem EX, this one actually is plausible. Not necessarily good, but definitely plausible here. For 1 fire and 2 colors, you do the same 60, but if you flip heads on this one, you attach a basic energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon. So that's okay, gets it the 4th energy. Not really amazing, to be honest, because it's just awkward. Having that 4th energy attached means it's more vulnerable to Mewtwo and just paints a bigger target on itself, I guess. But it's there if you want it, I suppose. And then 2 fire, 1 water, and a colorless, you do Ice Burn for 150. But again, 200 if you have Crystal Edge on, so you get one-shotting turn. And you have to discard 2 energy on this guy, and also burn the opponent as well. That is kind of noteworthy, because if they flip tails on the burn, that's 170, and that actually does get some KOs, even without additional damage mods. We do have Emboar, so unlike the Black Kyurem, this does actually have a deck you could play it in, and Emboar decks do want to play Heavy Ball anyway, so if you want to build a deck on this, it is actually possible. It's the worst version of the Keldeo deck that we'll be exploring, but you can, and that's the main thing. That's it for the main, like, holofoil chase stuff down here. Of course, we do have some full art supporters that we've been using this entire time because it just makes it easier. I personally use them because it makes it easier to see at a glance what cards you have like available. I don't know. I just like. I don't normally play high rarity, but when we don't have to pay for them, it's nice, right? And then, yeah, there was Golurk from the previous set, Terrakion from before, but I'm not as big a fan of this one as the full art, obviously, because nothing can top that. Altaria, which we played before, and Rocky Helmet gets a gold print here as well for what it's worth. I like these golds a lot more than the modern ones, though. The modern ones look far too gaudy for me. Anyway, on to the actual non-EX Pokemon in the set. We have a Vileplume over here that will be very funny later on, but is not like good at the moment for sure. Allergy Panic is the only thing really noteworthy about this. I guess it's Heavy Ball searchable as well, that could be something. But Allergy Panic makes it so that weakness in play is ×4 instead of ×2. Which means you only need to hit 50 damage in order to score one-shots on every EX Pokemon in the format as well. Problem is we don't have the toolbox of attackers yet to hit for necessary weaknesses on everything, especially grass itself. Like Pollen Spray is far too expensive to ever use, so you can't really attack with a Vileplume, and with the new hotness being Grass Week, there's just nothing you can hit it with that's relevant and going to do enough damage. Virizion is the best bet, you still need plus power after that, so yeah. There's a funny Blossom that's in the same line that doesn't do anything special with it, but I guess technically this could be used to one-shot the Keldeo stuff. Grass Knot does 10 plus 20 for every colorless in the defending Pokemon's retreat cost. This gets destroyed entirely by Darkrai, because Darkrai makes your retreat cost 0, but there is a Jellicent to note down here that increases the retreat of the opponent's Pokemon by 1, and it stacks, so you could play like 3 Jellicent down and the Blossom and do a reasonable amount of damage. The modifier is far too low, but it's a funny deck you could play if you really wanted to. As always I'm seeing in these, there aren't any other grass types that are worth noting, sadly, so we'll move on to the Charizard line, which is not a great Charizard, don't get me wrong, but there is the ability to play this one and it not be like the worst deck you could build. I just don't know how you power it up, because I don't think you can afford to play M-Ball with this deck as well, as much as it would want to. It's a 160 HP guy, so definitely up there. I think this might be the biggest Stage 2 that we've seen so far, because even M-Balls have been 150, so that's kind of nuts. Free energy to retreat, so Heavy Ball searchable. The Prevo stages are Level Ball searchable, which is nice, but Charmander does have a 2 energy retreat, which is kind of annoying. So yeah, you're not switching this out of the active anytime soon, unfortunately. Split Bomb for 1 fire and 2 colorless does 40 to 2 of the opponent's Pokemon. Cool. Nice little spread move. 40 is enough to KO Dynamos if they haven't evolved, which is kind of fun. Also just finishes things off, which is fine. And, I mean, you can set numbers up for its Scorching Fire attack, which is very hard to use. It's not normally the attack you're going to play, but for 1 fire and 4 colorless energy, 150 damage, discard 1 fire of this Pokemon. Compare this to the M-Board that we had in Black and White base. It's 2 fire, 2 colorless to do 150, so a little bit easier to pay, but you have to discard every fire that's on it. This you only discard 1 energy, and you could pay this with 2 double colorless and 1 fire if you somehow get there. That's kind of neat. I think this is the main target for Celebi though, because both the Charmander and the Charmeleon kind of have effects that you would want here. Charmander for 1 fire does draw in to attach 2 fires from your discard to this Pokemon, so this could be a way that you charge up the Charizard, is you go with an aggressive Ultra Ball Juniper draw at the start, and use that to discard fire energy that you draw in with the Charmander. So that could work if you have enough fires in hand at the start of the game. And the Charmeleon does Raging Claws for a fire double colorless, same effect as, or same attack cost as Split Bomb, 50 plus 10 for every damage counter on this Pokemon. Now we're kind of getting somewhere. This means that you don't always want to rare candy into Charizard, which can make the deck a little bit slow, but if you get a Raging Claws going, that's really powerful actually. Just being able to use your 160 HP to do a massive rage-based attack. It's the same thing as what Regigigas can do, except Regigigas is a 4 energy attack cost, even if it is 2 DCs. So, I don't know, there's something here. It's just not quite ideal, I guess. Because, yeah, evolving through Charmeleon makes it really slow. Evolving through even just going through the Charmander, drawing is an attack you've got to use and makes it vulnerable to Mewtwo, so that can make it kind of slow. And it doesn't quite have the numbers to kill Mewtwo in return, just off the top of its, just by itself. So, yeah, I don't know. Not a lot of other fire types even in the set, nothing else is worth noting. This M-Board doesn't do anything compared to the non-ability M-Board we already had, so yeah. I didn't mention the Shaman actually when I looked at the grass Pokemon. It has Call for Family just like Emolga does, but it doesn't resist water, which is weird. That's just a minor point. But it doesn't have an attack that you can really use afterwards either. Leaf Drain is too expensive, and it has a retreat cost, which Emolga does not. So there's basically no reason to play the Shaman. Maybe if it resisted water you could use it, but it doesn't, so whatever. Blastoise is the other huge thing from this set. I've mentioned Blastoise Keldeo as a deck, and for good reason, basically. 140 HP, standard on stage 2 at the moment. Hydro Pump for 4 colorless energy does 60 plus 10 for every water that's on this Pokemon. Spoilers, your deck at the moment is entirely water, so it's going to do 100 basically if you can power it up. That's enough to kill Sigilif, which is really good because that can be a problem against Keldeo, right? Because Keldeo doesn't get to touch it whatsoever, so that's fine. It's got a 4 energy retreat and a weakness to grass, so it isn't even hit by incidental attackers in Ray, which is, or like the Eel decks, which is good. And 4 energy retreat means you can play Heavy Ball in the deck as well. That'll be more relevant when Black Kyurem can get played, but yeah, later on. That's not just now. But what is good about it is that obviously it has Deluge, which is just Rain Dance but better. It's or Inferno Fandango, but blue. Let's put it that way. As often as you like during your turn, before you attack, you may attach a water energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. This is of course how you power up the Keldeo, but it's not Waterlot like it used to be. So think of how what Feraligatr was like, because we had Gator and Emboar in the same format, but Feraligatr could only attach to waters, which greatly limited what it could even do. This does not have that restriction. So you're able to use this alongside Mewtwo if you wanted to, as well, in the same deck. It's incredibly powerful with the Skylar stuff here. It can be much more consistent than you would think, and it's ridiculous. But it would still be very frail against these snipe attacks like Landorus. Even though it hits it for weakness, it would still be frail against that type of deck if it wasn't for the fact that the Squirtle has Shell Shield, which blocks bench damage while on the Squirtle whilst it is on the bench. So this means the opponent can't just hammerhead around, they have to hard catcher the Squirtles up. So if you're able to get 2 Squirtle in play, you are very likely to get Blastoise next turn with your Rare Candy stuff. So it makes it a lot easier to set this deck up than basically any of the other decks that are like it. And that makes it just more consistent in general. Very, very powerful card there. We have a Golduck in this set that is, I guess, supposed to pair with it, but it's obviously a bad version of the deck. It has no retreat and 90 HP though, so it's kind of fun. Amnesia is also decent, blocking one of the opponent's attacks. Some EXs like Darkrai and whatnot only have 1 attack, so you're forcing them to move around, which is kind of neat. And Aqua Fall for 2 water does 90. You gotta discard every energy on this Pokemon, but 2 for 90 is pretty good conversion numbers, so like it's fine, but nothing too special really. The Psyduck does Heavy Ball searchable though, so I guess that's something. None of the other waters are super noteworthy outside of the regular Keldeo. You could play this as a one-of in the deck for a 1 prize option. It's 110 HP, Grass Weak, 1 retreat this time, so Sky Arrow compatible I guess if you really wanted to, but you're going to play Tropical Beach, so that doesn't really matter. The main attack of note here is the Hydro Pump, which is the same as Blastoise's one, but it takes 1 colorless less to initiate. So you can do 90 for free instead of having to do 100 for 4. That's fine. Slicing Blade, I guess, could potentially come up if you start this or something, but it's mostly as a non-EX card to do a bit more damage than, you know, relying on Keldeo all the time, I guess, the EX one. So, yeah. The other one's not really worth anything, so we're not going to bother with it. Even though it's level ball searchable, it's just terrible. None of the Eelektриks are any good in this set. Even when we get Electrode for like Plasma Freeze or something, you're still not going to play the Voltorb in here, I don't think, because it's only got 50 HP, so it's bad. Psychic types, there's a couple of really good ones actually. The Dusknoir is insane. This card's only got 130 HP, but it is Heavy Ball searchable, so that could work with the deck. The Duskull is only 50 HP, could be a little bit annoying, but whatever. Dusclops has got Astonish, I suppose, that's kind of fun. Because it's not on a coin flip, being on stage 1. So I suppose you could play Celebi or something with that if you really wanted. It'd be pretty bad, so don't do it. But really, what you want out of this is not its Shadow Punch attack, that is also really bad, but you want Sinister Hand. As often as you like, during your turn before you attack, you may move one damage counter from one of the opponent's Pokemon to another of your opponent's Pokemon. That's right, this is Alakazam, but on the opponent's side of the field. And we are probably going to see that at some point, because, I mean, even if it's just Gothitelic Salgor, this does see play in a Nationals winning deck by the end of the format. It is kind of nuts, and any spread deck can take advantage of all the counters they're putting on the opponent's side of the field and just move them as they want. It's an absurdly powerful card, but it is a bit situational. It's a stage 2, so you do have to make some concessions to put it into the deck in the first place, and yeah, it's not always going to come up, but man oh man, being able to just manipulate everything. You take prizes during your turn, you allow yourself to kill whatever one Pokemon you want on their side, so long as you spread enough counters around, so you can take out the threat with the biggest energy count there. It's crazy good. Also means you can be very efficient with your damage numbers too. So say the Empoleon deck, where I'm like just short of getting one shot sometimes, doing 100 or 120 into something with 140 HP, I can move all the excess damage to somewhere else on their board and just go from there. Just keep the numbers going. It's very good. The Toxicroak is relatively noteworthy too. Both the Croagunks are not too great, but there is one with 70 HP, so it's good against the Snipe cards, that's not too bad. Toxicroak for 1 colorless does Revenge. I said we'd note this sort of attack plenty of times in this era, and this is like the 3rd time this number comes up. If any of your Pokemon were KO'd by damage during your opponent's last turn, from their attacks, you do 90 instead of 20, and it only costs 1 colorless to do so. Yeah, really good. This one-shots Mewtwo, which is something we could have done with like 2 sets ago. If this was in Dark Explorers, I think it would have been a lot better, but oh well, it's not that big of a deal. And yeah, if your deck really needs a way of dealing with Mewtwo and doesn't want to engage in the Mewtwo wars, this is a way to do it. It's pretty good. The good Munna finally comes out here, or Munna, I guess is the way you'd say it. It only has 60 HP compared to the 70 of the other ones, but long distance hypnosis, especially with Keldeo in the format, is pretty solid to have around. You can flip to make the opponent fall asleep. If you flip tails, your active goes to sleep, but if you're playing smart with Keldeos and stuff like that, you're going to be fine. It's not a problem. And then you get to evolve into the Moshana that lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and, get one of them to the hand, the other one goes back on top. So, extra consistency. Not too bad as a little tech line. The Moshana itself doesn't really do anything, but if you do end up putting yourself to sleep with a Munna on the bench, you can do 90 for, Psychic double colorless. It's interesting, I suppose. The fact if you can use it whilst asleep is really the big thing for it, but relying on putting yourself to sleep like that, never gonna happen. Swoobat is like terrible, but it's got one of my favorite attack names in all of TCG history. Jetwoofer, just to me is amazing. I don't know why, it just is. It's a terrible attack really, but there were some meme Bad Debt Monday shenanigans with like Gardevoir with this thing. For each psychic energy attached to this Pokemon, you discard the top card of the opponent's deck. So if you double the effect of your psychic energy on this with Gardevoir, you could do a really poor man's version of Durant that's just terrible and loses to everything, but it's very funny, and so some people would do it just because of that. The, apologies for knocking the mic there, the Scolipede line all has Poison Point, which if it's active and the opponent damages it with an attack, they get poisoned. This culminates in the end with Venoshock from the Scolipede at the very top, where for 2 Psychic and 2 Colorless it does 80, but if the opponent is poisoned it does 40 more damage. You can also Heavy Ball Search this. You could Heavy Ball Search the Whirlipede as well, but there was a Whirlipede a few sets ago, I think it might have even been Emerging Powers actually, which doesn't have Poison Point, but is 90 HP, so it's level ball searchable, and for 1 colorless energy does the Venoshock, where it's 10 plus 60 if the opponent is poisoned. So this is the other deck you could play with Celebi, where you can go poison them, but when they attack you they get poisoned, and then you evolve, you go Venoshock with the Whirlipede that you've evolved through, and you only pay 1 energy to do that attack. You do the 70, it's respectable, you've got a lot of HP, you could max potion at that point as well. The deck really wants Hypnotoxic Laser and Verbank though, because relying on the opponent to be poisoned via attacking you is questionable. There are many decks that's going to work against, but there are quite a few that can just attack around you, right? If I use, say, Raikou-EX, that would be very nasty against the Celebi, and you wouldn't necessarily want to do that. Also, Catcher. Just Catcher something that doesn't have Poison Point, right? So, yeah, it's unreliable at the moment, but it's a fun deck you could play next set, so we're noting it now because we wouldn't note it next set. Finally, Psychic got a lot of love in this set. Meloetta is a interesting single prize tech for dealing with Psychic weak stuff, especially Sigilith. 80 HP for 1 Psychic energy, literally Psychic, does 10 plus 20 for every energy on the defending Pokemon. So, specifically as a 1 prizer in EX-centric decks to deal with Sigilith, you can KO them if they have 2 energy on themselves, which is 1 less than they need to attack. So that is pretty cool. Echoed Voice is cute, but you've only got 80 HP. You're not putting Psychic DC on this thing unless you absolutely have to. So yeah. Fighting types don't really get anything else outside of what we've mentioned. Funnily, there's a Crustle that in XY format when Catcher gets errated, so it's harder to get around it. Crustle with Superior and Reuniclus was a bad Debt Monday deck, and Virizion EX, you had to do a lot of stuff for it. Basically, it's because of Sturdy. If it's at full HP and would be KO'd, then it becomes, by damage, then it's not KO'd and it has 10 HP left instead. It's Heavy Ball searchable, which is funny, I suppose, but yeah. The idea is that Superior heals damage off if you're bored, and Reuniclus lets you move the damage around, so you can always make it so this thing has full HP. Problem is, if it gets poisoned or something like that, then it just dies anyway. So once Hypnotoxic Laser comes out, it's terrible, and now it's just too frail to catch or killing all the bench stuff that you need. So yeah. Nothing for the Dark types, nothing huge for the Steel type. Scizor is something I remember seeing at one point as a funny deck, not necessarily a good one. I think this was more when Laser and stuff came out, so it had better damage numbers. But 120 HP is not bad for a Stage 1 Pokemon. And Steel Slash for DCE does 40, and the opponent cannot do damage to Scizor with EX Pokemon next turn. Of course, if they Catcher it away, then that goes away, but Catcher and then killing this is a little bit difficult, so that's neat. And Slashing Strike for 1 metal, 2 colorless does 100, and it can't Slashing Strike in consecutive turns. But that's your finisher. You do 40 for a fair while, you wall so that the opponent can't hit you with EX Pokemon. It's resistant to Psychic, so Sigilith is not as great against it, and if they just don't have a non-EX card that's good against you, you can wall them out for a fair while and finish them off with Slashing Strike when you have to. It's a fun deck, not necessarily a good one. Speaking on fun decks that are not necessarily good, well, I don't know about this one, to be honest. Flygon, I think, is a little bit easy to play around if the opponent knows exactly what you're doing and just goes like 1 EX Pokemon and that's it. But as a Stage 2 Pokemon, its Sand Slammer attack lets you put a damage counter on each of the opponent's Pokemon in between turns, so long as this card is active. Its attack doesn't matter because it's too expensive, but Grass Fighting double colorless to do 80 is just miserable. If you discard the Grass and the Fighting, you could leave them paralyzed, but those types don't have energy acceleration, so good luck with that. Yeah, it's for the Sand Slammer. This is one of the ways, there's actually a 0 energy deck that involves this, Dusknoir, and occasionally Chandelure. I'm going to try and fit that in as well, where you just leave this in the active in between turns. You spread to the opponent, you play 4 Tropical Beats, so you keep drawing your stuff through, and you eventually use Dusknoir to take the KOs that you want on their side once you build enough stuff up. If they don't play enough bench Pokemon down, that can kind of ruin the entire deck though, so you do have to get them to play into it just a little bit, but you know, with Chandelure and a heavy switch counter stuff as well, you could probably make something there. The Trapinch does have Smithereene Smash as a crushing hammer effect, so you could kind of go with some energy discarding stuff here as well, I guess. Not the greatest, but hey, it's there if you want. Regular Black Kyurem, this will be noteworthy when the other Black Kyurem EX comes out, like the next couple of sets when Blastoise Kyurem is the main way of doing it. This could sometimes be a one-off because of Flash Freeze. Water, Lightning, double colorless to do 100 and discard 1 energy off of this Pokemon. 130 HP basic is pretty solid as well for a 1-prizer, and it's used to beat other Black Kyurem in one shot without sacrificing 2 prizes to do so. That's pretty much it. So it's a mirror tag, but it's a pretty solid one because you can use it on Rayquaza as well, so not too bad really. There's a very, very funny Raticate in this set. It's only got 60 HP and the Rattata's only got 30, so it dies immediately to Hammerhead, so obviously really, really bad. But Super Fang, for 3 colorless energy, puts the opponent down to 10 HP guaranteed. If you copy this with Mew EX, then it's a little bit less frail, like your opponent's got a catcher at that point for it, and next set when Hypnotoxic Laser comes in, you could actually get a KO on any Pokemon that's affected by special conditions. So that's very funny, but yeah, clearly not good at the moment. The Ditto is exceptionally interesting here. Ditto usually gets a lot of interesting cards, but this one might be the most interesting since the base set one, the fossil one, to be honest. It's got 70 HP, and its ability, before you attack, lets you put a basic Pokemon from your hand on top of the Ditto. This does not count as playing that Pokemon or evolving. You now are that Pokemon, but any cards attached to the Ditto, any damage counters, any special conditions, critically any turns in play, and any other effects remain on the new Pokemon. So this can be used, you could just like attach an energy to it and then be able to bluff, say put an EX down on it or something. You're not giving up 2 prizes immediately, but when you actually want to attack with that EX, you can then do so. So that's pretty neat. Also, you can use this as I'm playing this basic down because my actual basic is frailer than this, because 70 HP is bigger than most evolving basics at the moment. And then next turn you go play the basic onto the Ditto, rare candy, go up. So it can be used as a more sturdy thing there, effectively acting as a pseudo 5th basic, which is pretty powerful in its own right. Also, it counts as an extra Pokemon for the future as well, when Vengeance type attacks come in. So yeah, there's a lot of versatile uses for it if you want to go down that route. And then there are 2 other cards to look at here. The Stoutland in this set is an intriguing one, just a little bit below the power curve I think, but it's not too bad. Heavy Ball, Searchable, 140 HP. As long as this Pokemon is your active, your opponent can't play supporters from their hand whilst this Sentinel ability is in play. So Supporter Lock is devastating right now. That's where all of our draw power comes from. So if you could get it out, that'd be really good. The problem is you've got to actually be able to attack with it as well, especially considering it's weak to fighting, so Landorus chews it up, and that's where it kind of falls apart a little bit. For 3 colorless energy you do 90 damage, not terrible conversion numbers, but if you flip tails you do 20 to yourself, and it's just a little awkward for that, right? There's a couple of things going in its favor. Even though it's only got 50 HP, there's a Lillipup in format that lets you pick an item from your discard pile back into hand for 1 colorless, so that's kind of cool. There's the Herdia, they've all got 80 HP, but there's one for 2 colorless that draws 3 cards, so if you're in a pinch, that might also be a thing. It's of course double colorless compatible, so that can work, and yeah, it's fine, but it does have a rather nasty weakness at the moment, and I think you'll have a hard time setting it up. Also, if the opponent is playing Garbodor, they can just attach a tool to shut this off and then play the supporter that they want to, so yeah. And then the final card, maybe not so good at the moment, but there are still technically reasons you would play it. Ordino has an ability in the hand is the main thing you want here. Once during your turn before you attack, if this Pokemon is in your hand, you may reveal it. If you do, heal 10 and remove a special condition from your active Pokemon, then discard this Pokemon. So this is useful for the Flareon deck, where you basically just go ahead, discard this as an extra Pokemon. You get to heal damage, you heal laser later on as well, that's why it'll be useful. And yeah, it's an extra Pokemon in the discard, so Vengeance gets fueled. Hit Bump is funny, and I have had some memes about this one in the past when Gen 6 was a thing and Ordino was in my like collection. 30 damage for DCE, and if the opponent tries to attack next turn, they flip a coin. If tails, it does nothing. If they switch, of course, this effect goes away, because it's a sand attack sort of thing, but it's funny if you have to play it down, but try not to have to play it down, basically. Yeah, it's a tech card. It would have been very good when Vanillux was playable, even though we never showed that deck, it was still around, so would have been funny, but oh well. Anyway, yeah, large set, like 154 cards I think it was in this one, so big set to go through. And there's a lot of cool cards, but realistically it's about Landorus, and it's about Blastoise, Keldeo. Those are the new decks to play with, and then a bunch of psychic stuff if you want to do some funny things as well. That's it though. Hopefully this was interesting enough. Thank you very much for watching, and man, nostalgic going through a lot of this stuff, because again, this was the set that I got into the game again with, so very cool to see it laid out like this. Even if it's not the greatest set in the world, it still holds a special place in my heart. Till the games, we will see you next time.